Armored Core 6 has a lot of preset mechs, and you've probably never used a single one of them. Well, I have. In fact, I'm close to beating the game with each of the preset data you receive from the arena fights, so let me tell you all about them. I will be going up the list starting from the last one, because that's the order I played with them, assuming the ones at the bottom should be the best. How wrong I was. This ranking will consider the overall effectiveness of the entire package, as well as a little bit of how fun it is to use. I will also only be talking about the single-player campaign. The choices I was making across these playthroughs are the choices I thought this character would have made in my stead. This had a significant impact on the challenges I faced. This game revolves a lot around building your own mech, but what if you can't really be bothered to figure it all out and just want a quick way to jump into the game? Well, that's where presets should come in. They're meant to be a quick way to approach some playstyle or concept without forcing a player to build a new AC every time. They should be decent enough for someone to want to pick them, but will never be excellently suited towards whatever your current mission is, because they've been made ahead of time. Well, as we'll find out across the series of videos, this goal has not been achieved. Many of these ACs are significantly worse than what even a below-average gamer would conjure up themselves. Some of them are a weird hodgepodge of various parts, which don't synergize well and just aren't suited for any particular purpose. However, each of these ACs represents a real character from the campaign that we encounter. Therefore, I think the real purpose of these builds is whatever the mission designer wanted for them to achieve in the game. With this in mind, I'm not going to be rating these ACs compared to the best meta builds the community has created. Instead, they will be on a scale relative to only each other. I'm basically pretending there is no feature to build your machine yourself and you're stuck with the presets. Let's get started. Echo. I started with the bottom of the list, assuming we would follow a general trend of decreasing quality and therefore increasing difficulty. However, this is absolutely not how it went. This is the AC that Air pilots during the All-Mind boss battle alongside us. We've got a Coral rifle as our primary firearm. It deals decent damage, but not a lot of stagger, has a low rate of fire and the projectiles are quite slow. Coupled with the machine having the Ocellus FCS, for some fucking reason, it's actually quite difficult to land shots. The rifle can charge up an alternate attack, which consumes twice the ammo and deals respectable damage. It also doesn't immediately force the gun into cooldown, unlike most charged attacks. However, it takes a bit too long to charge up and forces you to stand still while firing, which makes it quite risky to use. Oh, and as if that wasn't enough, the ammo capacity is quite low, so using this as a primary weapon even on missions of average length will leave you accidentally punching the enemies at the end. The Coral Oscillator is virtually identical to the Moonlight Blade weapon, but better. It can fire up to 2 fairly quick slashes in succession, or slowly charge up this wide arc with a shorter range. It doesn't consume ammo, but goes into cooldown every time you use it. It's not very long, thankfully, but this weapon just doesn't do anything very well, beyond never running out of ammo. The last offensive option is this Coral Missile. It deals huge damage but is slow as all hell and never seems to hit anything. It takes an eternity to lock on and another eternity to charge up. I really don't like this weapon because it seems to just never be able to hit any somewhat mobile target. And the fourth unit is this Coral Shield. I never really got to grips with the shields in this game. The damage they mitigate doesn't really seem worth sacrificing a weapon for. Plus, I find it more fun to try and just avoid the attack altogether. This shield is special in that it covers you from all angles, but the protection is underwhelming as a result. As far as the frame goes, we've got a light-ish weight ephemera set. The total AP comes out to just under 10k, which is nothing to scoff at. No major complaints there. However, I am unimpressed with the mobility. The Gills booster has decent stats on paper, but it doesn't offer the kind of crazy acceleration values of the Alula kind. The FCS is Ocellus, which is the FCS I'd pick if I wanted to choose the worst possible option. It excels for close-range aim assist, but the weapons on this AC are more geared towards mid-range. The assists for the other ranges are dogshite, as is the lock-on correction, which really diminishes the value of the Coral missile. When playing with this AC, I kind of got used to the reticle drunkenly flying around the screen, desperately trying to lock on to the target. The generator is one of 2 Coral generators in this game, and they are of a very eccentric breed. They boast great capacities and EN output, but the recovery values are terrible. When waiting to recover some energy, you will be able to go outside, mow your lawn, do your groceries, and it still won't have started to recover. However, this goes for if you haven't emptied the supply. If you do, the energy will still take forever to come back, but at least you will immediately gain most of it back. Therefore, the most effective way to use this generator is to always empty your supply entirely. This is problematic. I'm used to not emptying my energy, so when playing with this AC, I have to constantly think of doing additional actions that I don't actually want to do in order to empty my fuel tank. Having to do 1 or 2 additional quick boosts when I don't actually need to can sometimes be dangerous in of itself. Regardless, this generator will still require you to sit out long timeouts, unable to do anything, and that's why I'm not in love with it. At least the energy firearm spec is higher than most generators, but it's not all that much either. And finally, the expansion. Pulse protection creates a large stationary barrier that covers you from incoming damage. This option has grown in my esteem over my playtime because it's more flexible than it might seem. Neither you nor the enemy are limited in their movement, but the sphere protects from all damage, regardless of if it's coming from the outside or inside. You can leave the sphere and the enemy can enter it, but as long as you have the wall in between the two of you, you're safe. It lasts longer and can protect you from more damage than pulse armor. This isn't necessarily the best option, but it works well for its purpose. Remember, air is meant to support you in the last fight, and this expansion is the only way she can directly protect you. That's the purpose of this AC in general, so that air has a representation. However, I am rating this machine as it is in the hands of the player. All in all, this AC has some situationally powerful weapons, but they don't really work well together. The entire selection doesn't have a clear purpose in mind, they were only chosen because they were Coral themed. The internals also really cripple the tenacity and practicality of this machine. I just realized I still haven't corrected this, but in the script the name of this AC is just written as HAL whatever, and because I couldn't be bothered to look up the letters and numbers, so that's how it still is. Anyway, it's Walter, okay. Another Coral-themed build, featuring the same generator, missile and shield. The rifle is a little different. It has a much higher ammo capacity, fire rate, and 2 stages of charge. The first charge is just a stronger shot, but the second one emits this huge laser beam, which you can control. The damage on it is not very impressive for how long it takes to charge. It leaves you vulnerable, but at least you can quick boost out of it. Let's talk about ammo capacity. In online discussions about builds in this game, people often seem to only consider weapons and parts in the context of AC or boss battles. However, there is sometimes an entire mission before those. There's missions like Intercept the Red Guns, which often leave lesser equipped builds completely defenseless by the end. In fact, even some longer boss fights, such as All Might, can easily bleed dry your regular laser or plasma rifle. All that's to say, the ammo capacity is actually quite a good thing to have in this game. The other new weapon is this weird thing. A normal attack will use it as a blade for melee strikes. However, the charged attack is this sweeping laser. I'd hazard a guess that these special moves were made mainly to serve as a cool boss fight. This sweep has better range than a melee weapon, but leaves you open to attack for so long. At least it deals a lot of damage, and it can be used to eliminate a group of weaker enemies without having to expend ammo. It's pretty hard to aim though. The frame is a bit more sturdy and stable than that of Echo, but the AC is significantly less mobile. By looking at the booster, you'd think it's the best booster ever. However, one of its problems is this excessively long quick boost duration. It's presented as a good thing by the graphs, but the best way to describe how it feels to be using this machine would be fat rolling in Dark Souls. It just doesn't feel right. I'm not very knowledgeable on what variables affect the movement of the AC, but this preset just doesn't feel as mobile as the part selection screen makes it seem. At least the FCS is better this time round. And finally, the expansion. Assault Armor has grown a lot in my esteem over my playtime. For many preset builds, this is the best punish option they've got, and it does deal a really solid chunk of damage on a staggered enemy. It's also very reliable at staggering them in the first place, but you have to be very close. The AI isn't very good at reacting to this move and doesn't know to run away. My favorite thing about this expansion is that it hard counters pulse armor. If you are close enough, you can react to an AC, activating their protection, in order to immediately break through it and stagger them as well. Extremely satisfying. To sum up, this AC is a step up in terms of weaponry, but it feels far worse to move around. It's about as nimble as a heavyweight, but doesn't have the AP to match. Some of its moves are absolutely devastating. Steel Haze Ortus. Air says this AC was built for mobility, but I don't really see it. It feels more like a fairly average mid-weight biped. The booster is fairly mediocre, as is the generator. Speaking of generator, thank fuck we finally have a generator that feels normal and doesn't ask a million things of you to keep it satisfied. The FCS is the Abbot, specialized for close range, which is appropriate given the weaponry. And the weaponry is pretty good. The Viento is a small pistol-like kinetic weapon. It deals a ton of damage and impact, but has mediocre range, a small magazine and total ammo capacity, along with a reload time that takes forever to complete. It's got to be balanced somehow, I guess. The other major player is the Huxley. It's a little guy you activate, and he flies along with you to fire bullets of his own volition. It deals little damage, but a ton of impact. That's about the best thing I can say about it, because everything else is unimpressive at best. The range is quite small, it takes a long time to activate and deactivate, overheats extremely quickly, and it has a small ammo limit. You cannot pick when it fires either, so it will sometimes completely waste an attack window. The dual needle launchers on the back are a perplexing addition. I'm not really sure what their purpose is supposed to be. They require you to assume stance when firing, but the damage and impact doesn't really match that requirement. Keep in mind that we need to compare this to weapons such as the Songbirds, which also need you to stop moving while firing. There's a little bit of homing with those, but not much. Plus, it takes a long time to lock on. These needles feel too powerful to not require stance, but not powerful enough to expose yourself like that either. However, all of this will come together when we discuss the final weapon. Rusty's signature weapon is the Laser Slicer. It's a melee punisher, which strikes many times per second while extending the enemy's stun to take full damage from the combo. This is pretty effective on its own, but keep in mind the Huxley can keep firing throughout this whole sequence, layering the damage. And on top of that, the needle launcher's short reload time means they will always be ready to fire on a staggered and immobile enemy after the Slicer's combo is done, which also means locking on isn't necessary. These weapons have some really good synergy together, I just wish the melee spec of the arms was higher. To finish on a more disappointing note, the expansion is Terminal Armor. This expansion is easily the worst of the lot. It automatically triggers a shield around you when you would have died and puts you at 1 HP instead. It lasts longer and can absorb more damage than the regular armor, but you can only use it once as opposed to twice, and you cannot pick when it triggers, so it's not possible to use it to shed stagger during a fight. It saved me a couple of times, but the pulse protection saved me more. To try and round it up, the weapons on this AC are not incredible individually, but have a great synergy. They specialize in building stagger and then performing a heavy punish. It's clear the designer of this AC knew what they were doing and had a clear purpose in mind. The only downsides are the low melee spec, a low total ammo supply, the generator's underwhelming capacity, and terminal armor. It's clear the expansion was picked for the purposes of having a cool moment in the boss fight. Nightfall. This AC gets a lot of hate from the community, and I can see why. The internals and frame are some of the worst possible. However, I'd argue the combination of the weapons on this machine is easily top tier. We've got an assault rifle, which doesn't impress with its power. That's not what it's here to do though. It's a reliable tool for taking out groups of weak enemies. It's got decent range, magazine size, fire rate, and a great ammo capacity. Perfect for long missions with unknown challenges. Another dependable tool is the dual missile launcher. It's easiest to hit things at mid-range, doesn't require you to assume stance, reloads quickly, and just maintains some of that ever-important stagger. The last ranged option is the Songbirds, an extremely powerful explosive launcher best used from above to hit enemies with the splash damage. And rounding out the arsenal, the ever-brilliant Pile Bunker melee weapon. The charged attack deals unparalleled damage, but has a short range, is very picky with when it connects, and doesn't take you forward at all. This means you should ideally be already in kissing range when the enemy gets staggered. As such, the assault rifle is the best weapon to preserve your mobility. If you cannot do that, the uncharged punch can close the gap and deals okay damage too. Now the AC itself. It's problematic to say the least. The frame totals to around 9k AP, which is not a tragically low amount. However, the booster absolutely sucks and results in a heavyweight tier mobility. Therefore, both the health pool and the attitude stability are irredeemably low for how slow this AC feels. The generator is atrocious as well, with a tiny capacity. And, of course, the FCS is not suited for the weaponry. To end on a better note, the Assault Armor expansion can be used if your Rubiconian handshake happens to be on cooldown or something. One cool application of this tool I haven't mentioned comes into play when fighting ACs programmed to take advantage of stagger. You can actually activate expansions when you're staggered, so an enemy such as Rusty will get in close for a punish only to get staggered in return and receive an ass spanking of their own. To sum it up, I do acknowledge how terrible the frame and internals are, but this is contrasted with an inversely powerful and laser-focused arsenal that can shred just about anything on Rubicon. Institute. This AC is virtually identical to Echo in its frame and internals. The only real difference is an inferior coral generator with all the shortcomings of its ilk. The expansion has also been swapped for terminal armor. It's like they're trying to make this as shit as possible. As for the weapons, the primary firearm is a plasma rifle. Plasma is a damage type which creates a lingering bubble of AoE damage on impact. It is very easy to hit things with and can deal some okay-ish damage on stationary targets. However, the rate of fire is slow, has underwhelming stagger, is not effective against mobile enemies, and the charged shot is just a bigger bubble. The ammo capacity is also on the lower side. The back weapons are two sets of Aurorae. These units produce an accelerating hail of 4 projectiles, which have quite good tracking and deal a significant amount of stagger. What's the catch? Well, they're not actually very good at hitting things. Instead of taking advantage of the multiplicity of projectiles, they seem to always converge on each other when about to hit the target. This means a nimble foe is not going to struggle to evade them. The lock-on time is also astronomically high. Rounding off, we have the Moonlight Blade, which doesn't really have any advantage over the Coral counterpart. With how little stagger you're bound to be dealing, you must use this weapon proactively to aid in this effort. This machine is just an inferior version of Echo in many ways. It has very bad overall ammo capacities, underwhelming mobility and survivability, and also lacking damage and stagger output. Mind Gamma. The first of 3 all-mind dedicated ACs. This one is probably my least favorite, but they're all quite good. The frame is a mid-weight amalgam of alpha and beta parts with around 10k AP and a respectable stability. The reverse joints allow for the highest jumps and have very powerful kicks. However, the actual kick power of this AC is not as staggering as some others we'll be discussing. The booster specs also don't really reflect how the AC feels to move. The primary weapon we've got here is the Karasawa. It's an energy rifle capable of firing both plasma and lasers, and has 2 stages of charge. The basic attack is not very powerful, but the rate of fire makes up for it. The first charged shot is a laser beam, which consumes 8 units of ammo. It is quite powerful, but that ammo consumption feels excessive. That's not all though. The final stage of charge is this highly damaging laser and plasma combination, which consumes 20 units of ammo. For context, the entire ammo capacity is 160. The Ludlow is the other firearm. It's a kinetic light machine gun with high ammo capacity, which can be useful for maintaining stagger at close range. And finally, the Laser Orbit is a weak counterpart to the Huxley. It shares the same weaknesses, but it barely ever misses. You need a Steel Haze type of opponent to have trouble hitting. The final unit is a shield, which can be quite powerful at absorbing damage. However, I think this build would really benefit from having a dedicated punish weapon, especially since we have pulse armor. This machine has 3 weapons which, if working in unison, can stagger an AC fairly quickly. The way it is now, the energy rifle's charged shot is your best option, but ammo scarcity will bleed you dry on more prolonged missions. That and the generator being pretty weak are the main downsides of this AC. At least the FCS is good. Rubiconian. This will be the first of many ACs, which feel like a random collection of parts that don't really do anything well. We start with the Sweet 16. It's the worst shotgun by far, having atrocious range and reload time. The Etsujin, I could swear felt better in the past, but now it's just a fairly middling way of building stagger. Maybe it's because the FCS is trash and you'll be missing shots like it's your 4th hour at the bar. The arms also have a firearm spec lower than my will to live. The Delivery Boy is a cool idea, and I go back and forth on loving it or being indifferent. It's a big missile that flies around in circles and bombs the area. It's very good at hitting things, especially big things, and deals impressive damage. However, it's very slow and impractical, takes forever to lock on, and even forces you to stand still to fire. The final weapon is the Stun Bomb Launcher. It's a good way of applying electric discharge buildup across a wide area and without forcing you to assume stance, but kind of useless otherwise. So we have 3 weapons that are decent to good at building stagger, and 1 weapon that does next to nothing. I mean, at least you can cycle between the shotgun and the launcher, but this build would really benefit from a punish weapon. The kick or the Sweet 16 will have to do, and they're not very impressive, as is the frame. The parts differ in character, such as the head having good AP and stability, but the core being exceptionally frail. The legs are the spring chicken reverse joints, which I really like overall. They feel very good to use, and the load limit lets you carry just about anything. However, the weapons really benefit from close range, and the high jump on these legs takes me a bit too far away from the enemy. It's exceptionally hard to hit anything using this AC, so it kind of needs an overhaul. Better FCS, better arms, better generator, and a punish weapon instead of the Therapist. If it just had assault armor, it'd be a lot better, but it has no expansion. Corporation. The first tetrapod we've come across, and it does not live up to how good such builds can be. There's 3 tetrapod sets in this game, and they're unique in that they can hover mid-air while consuming very little energy, and can also use weapons such as grenade launchers or charged energy rifles without having to assume stance. This one uses the most intermediate legs on the weight scale, and I think they are the worst ones. You can get more maneuverable bipedal legs with more attitude stability and load limit than those. I think if you're making a tetrapod build, you should go for either the lightest ones to take advantage of their speed, or the heaviest ones to get the stability and AP. These are kind of the worst of both worlds. Furthermore, the weapon selection doesn't really necessitate the use of such a leg type. This AC is another mishmash of various parts made by the 2 main corporations of the game. The frame parts doesn't really know if it wants to be a heavyweight or not. What's even weirder is that most of these weapons are not utilized by any corporate AC. The Chang Chen is one of the weakest automatic weapons. The Ludlow is better in every way that isn't magazine and ammo capacity. Still, it's fairly practical. This laser rifle is pretty sweet, as it fires faster than most laser weapons. We've got the vertical missiles as well. Those fly high up into the air to strike from above. However, their tracking is really bad, and they have trouble hitting anything more mobile than a tetrapod MT. And even if they do, the stagger they build up decays by a lot. The final weapon is this laser turret dispenser. It leaves behind these tiny laser guns, which are very good at hitting things. They can deal some respectable damage when you manage to stack a lot of them in one area, but they're underwhelming otherwise. This might seem like a weird assortment of weapons without much deliberation as to how you're meant to use them. The laser gun is your best punish option, but the AC could really use better ways to build stagger. Furthermore, these weapons do not take advantage of its tetrapod nature, and hovering above enemies often leaves you out of range of your best weapons. Some of the parts could be better too. As good as the Alula booster is, this mech doesn't feel reflectively mobile. The generator also needs some work, as the recovery specs are weak and the FCS is underwhelming. At least the pulse armor is there to save this fragile hunk of bolts. Mind Beta. The second of the All-Mind mechs, ironically made of only Mind Alpha parts, is probably the worst of the lot. It's got the same internals as Gamma, and the frame is quite sturdy, but lacking the reverse joint jump height and kick power. The Karasawa and Laser Orbit are back, but we've got a different shield. This one has good damage protection, but lacks an absorbing impact, which is probably more important. The other change is the Laser Dagger melee weapon. I love this little thing. The damage it deals isn't as staggering as some other blades, but it's got other advantages. It's very quick to strike, which makes it a good option against enemies such as Iguazu, who recover from stagger extremely quickly. The cooldown is extremely short too. You can literally do a combo into a kick and already be ready to attack again. Another benefit of weapons that hit many times is that you can attack before the enemy is quite staggered and then still take advantage of the additional damage. Like all melee options, this one has a charged attack. It's a more powerful single sweep with better range. However, I rarely use it, just because the AC always seems hell-bent on killing some invisible phantom enemy behind the one I'm actually targeting. The problem with this weapon selection is they just don't work well together. You'd think the dagger is the main punish tool, but we're lacking ways in building stagger in the first place. The Laser Orbit is only really good at maintaining stagger, and the Karasawa is just one gun that isn't even kinetic. The ultimate charge attack can stagger most ACs instantly, but it consumes way too much ammo to use it all the time. The weak shield takes up a slot that could be used for some missile launcher or what have you. I find the best way to use this AC is to treat the dagger as a weapon like any other in order to conserve Karasawa ammo. It's quite a risky way to play and you'll be eating a lot of bullets, so this preset is quite lacking. Tester. This AC I felt dirty to even equip, not because it's so amazing, but because it's easily bottom tier. Let's start with the frame. It's the Tian Qiang set, which boasts some good AP and stability. That's the best thing I can say about this preset, and it is completely null and void anyway, due to the shitty boosters and generator, resulting in an unforgivably slow and clunky machine that is easily outmaneuvered by bipeds with even higher AP. The booster specs seem to have some standouts, but many of them don't even matter. The QB jet duration is high, but that's not actually a good thing, because it locks you into moving in one direction for too long. The low EN consumption isn't useful, because the generator's capacity is lower than my patience for this AC, and the core part does everything to fuck it all up as well. Even the FCS is pretty bad for the weaponry. And what is the weaponry? Well, we've got a burst assault rifle, not to be confused with a burst rifle. This gun is nothing special. The damage and impact output is subpar, the range is not good either, and the burst nature means many shots will get lost somewhere when an enemy reacts and dodges the attack. The burst rifle proper edges this weapon out in basically every way. Another new type of weapon is this active homing missile launcher. This one fires two slow, but quite powerful projectiles, not unlike the Coral counterpart. Their purpose is more so to elicit a reaction than directly damage the enemy. However, the AI is quite bad at actually dodging them, and they have an unexpectedly high hit rate for how easy they are to avoid. Still, you can't really expect them to hit. They can deal some damage, but it's a very unreliable weapon type, especially with how long it takes to actually lock on and travel the distance. You also desperately need to be at least in medium range, as otherwise they will fly into the ground trying to pursue the target. The final weapon, yes, there's only three, is the Pulse Blade. It's a very reliable punish melee with a single charged attack that's a bit more powerful. The boosters manage to fuck up even this one good thing about this AC, as they won't take you far during the melee attack, and they will take you there slowly. There isn't enough tools to stagger the enemy for the Pulse Blade to really shine. Despite this one good inclusion, don't think this preset is escaping my wrath. Remember, even Rummy has one good weapon. This one isn't as terrible, but you don't have to be as bad as Rummy to be among the worst. Hell, just give me assault armor, and I'd be staggering and pulse blading enemies left, right and center, but there is no expansion on this machine. Trainer. Looking at the specs of the frame and internals of this AC, it seems like this machine was built specifically to be as versatile and compromising as possible. Almost all of the sliders are near the middle of the gauge. Despite this, it doesn't feel bad. The booster really is enough to avoid most of the damage coming your way, and the AC doesn't feel frail either. Everything about it is just really decent. I have less good things to say about the weapons though. The Ludlow returns, and, combined with this linear rifle, can shred through weaker enemies. This weapon type fires slowly, but has very good range. There's also this charged attack, which takes very little time to charge, doesn't overheat the gun, and also only consumes one bullet. However, most of the impact it deals decays quickly, so it's only really useful as a punish. The problem is that simply unloading with both your weapons will provide a similar amount of damage, which is not very much. The third and final weapon is this light 4-cell missile launcher. It's not very powerful, but it reloads quickly, locks on near instantaneously, and the projectiles are very good at hitting things. Another dependable and versatile weapon. Everything about this AC screams dependable and versatile, but the lack of a dedicated punish weapon really sets it back in one important department: damage output. Just put a Pulse Blade in the empty slot, and you're good to go for 90% of what the game can throw at you. An expansion would probably go a long way as well. Mind Alpha. This was the first All-Mind AC to be constructed, with the ones previously discussed being further iterations. And it's a shame, as this is the best one in my opinion. The Mind Alpha frame boasts the exact same internals, so not much is different, but the weapons are really good. The laser orbit is back, the most unremarkable one. The Javelin Alpha Bazooka is one of my favorite weapons in this game. The way it works is that it scatters many small explosions as it flies. It's very easy to hit things with and deals absolutely unprecedented damage. You can fire it just before an enemy is staggered so that further explosions can deal stagger damage. The Javelin Beta missile launcher is similar in that a single missile will fly along a horizontal arc, leaving an explosive trail as it does. The AI struggles to avoid this, and this attack deals a significant amount of both damage and impact. The final weapon is this plasma thrower, the Hammer. It's technically a melee weapon, but has far better range than most. It's got a charge attack, which does something. Not that I'd know, cause it's fucking impossible to hit anything with it. These three weapons are some of the most fun to use because of how unique and wacky they are. This weapon selection is very good for preset standards, but this AC lacks in crowd control. The only weapon that can fire moderately quickly is the laser orbit, and it's too weak to be a workhorse for taking on groups of MTs. Because the javelins fire so slowly, this AC is not excellent at building stagger to punish. Therefore, I'd swap out the orbit for some kinetic weapon, and add some expansion, such as pulse armor. This is on top of my other observations regarding the internals and frame. Locksmith. This is one of the most boring and unimpressive ACs on this whole list. I remember nothing from my playthrough with it. That's how forgettable an experience it is to play. The assault rifle is a plus from me, and it pairs well with the laser sword. The normal attack allows you for one slash with good damage, but its real strength lies in the charged move. It takes a while to charge, but the result is a huge and devastating double sweep. Another downside it has is that the plane of the sweep is adjusted based on the relative positions of you and the target, and this sometimes results in some funky whiffs. Still, the damage it deals rivals the pile bunker, it is that good. It's also the best thing about this AC. The laser drones are really weak. It's shocking how little they do before they drop like dead flies. They can also be charged and can deal some okay damage if they hit. The last weapon is the spread bazooka, which is quite powerful. It fires 5 rockets, which can deal a lot of damage and impact, not unlike the songbirds. However, it needs to be fired at close range for maximum effectiveness. Its main downside is the low ammo capacity. The frame is this really basic biped with middling stats, not unlike the trainer AC. The internals also scream of being as average as possible. The generator has a low capacity and recharge stats, and its best attribute is the energy firearm spec. Can you count how many energy firearms there are on this AC? The expansion is pulse armor, which further compounds how boring of a basic bitch Freud is. This AC is not bad, it will take you places, but its only exceptional aspects are 2 weapons. That's just not enough. Liger Tail. A heavyweight tetrapod with a hell of a bite. The Huben minigun is an exceptionally devastating kinetic weapon. It doesn't require reloading, but does slowly overheat. Its main downside is the fairly low range. The first shoulder weapon are the top tier songbirds. Despite being a tetrapod, they still require the mech to slow down a lot when firing, which is a bit of a downside. The other is this dual split missile launcher. Split missiles are special in how they travel in unison towards the target and then split into several small missiles and converge on the target from different angles. This functionality is not very important to me, but they can deal some good damage and impact for a missile weapon. I also like how the launch is slightly staggered, which makes it easier to hit an evasive enemy. The final weapon is this explosive thrower. It's literally a box with small bombs that you throw in an arc in front of you. It's basically a melee weapon, but one with fairly good range. Still, the closer you are, the more damage it will deal. It kind of feels like it's meant to be the Punisher, but the damage isn't quite there in my opinion. It seems like unloading with the Huben on a staggered enemy, will deal more damage than the explosive thrower. Therefore, feel free to use it in order to apply stagger in the first place. One nice thing about it is that the tetrapod legs allow you to keep moving while the bombs do what bombs do. This weapon selection is quite powerful, but it would have been top tier with a proper punish melee. I guess Michigan just wouldn't be caught using an energy weapon. The frame is this heavy set of parts. None of the stats really jump out at me as being overly bad or excessively good either. I rate these tetrapod legs as the load limit they provide is worth the hit in mobility. The generator is the Sun Tai with the highest energy capacity in the game, which I approve of. The FCS specializes in mid-range, which I don't approve of. I think close range would be better for the Huben and explosive thrower. Pulse protection is Michigan's expansion of choice, which has some nice synergy with the tetrapod's hover. One downside of this expansion with most AC legs is that if it's triggered mid-air, you will have to continually expend energy to stay within its embrace. The ability to hover for a very low energy cost helps with this issue. Still, having to constantly maneuver around the bubble to keep a wall between you and the enemy is a headache that Pulse Armor manages to avoid, and that's what I would have picked. Overall, this AC has some strong weaponry, good at staggering and shredding down your opponent. A better punish in the form of a melee or energy weapon would make it more than a force to be reckoned with. Aster Crown. I don't want to be too mean, because this AC can be powerful, but it almost feels like it was created using purely RNG, and without consideration as to how the components work together. The setup offers two kinetic guns, the Sampo Burst handgun and the Harris linear rifle. Let's talk about the weapon ranges in this game. The problem with having one exceedingly short-range gun and one exceedingly long-range gun is that you still have to get close if you want both to be effective. In that case, you might as well put another short-range weapon, save some EN and weight, which might let you make the AC more mobile. There are some games where having one long-range weapon and one short-range weapon is a good thing, like in some first-person shooters. However, in this genre of games, you can usually use only one weapon at a time. Therefore, you just pull out the weapon you want to be using in the situation. However, in Armored Core 6, you have up to 4 weapons equipped at any given time, and many of them can all be firing simultaneously. Therefore, attributes such as Energy Firearm spec encourage you to go in on either energy weapons or just ignore it and pick a generator based on other qualities, which encourages you to go all kinetic. You can also only pick one FCS to govern all of your weapons. These game mechanics subtly push the player towards using weapons similar to each other, which specializes their AC and makes it unique. Yeah, so back to the weapon selection. These two guns don't go very well together, but they can shred if used in unison. I'd pick a more normal pistol, as I feel they have more sustained impact output, and I prefer the Curtis over the Harris for the same reason, but these are fine too. The third weapon is this triple laser cannon. It deals incredible damage but is very unwieldy. Even the uncharged fire mode requires these barrels to flip around and take aim before firing. It's a good ranged punish weapon. That's also the only thing it's good at, given its ammo capacity is only 24. Doesn't seem too bad, right? Well, what I didn't mention is that it consumes 3 cells per shot. That's right, you are allowed to use this weapon a whopping... I wrote 4 times. Why did I write 4 times? It's 8 times, it's clearly 8 times. A whopping 8 times before requiring a resupply. It's a punish weapon and a punish weapon only. The last unit is the Pulse Scutum. How the fuck do I say? Scutum pronunciation.
Scutum.
Scutum? Okay. Pulse Scutum It's the equivalent of the fingerprint shield in Elden Ring. If you want to use it, pull it up and never set it down. The impact mitigation can be immense, but it takes a while to reach that point. This shield feels like a godsend, given the heavyweight tetrapod nature of this AC, until you realize the shield resets if you so much as fire the linear rifle. And that's not all. Wanted to have a quick boost anyway for fun? Say goodbye to your protection. Assault boosting is out of the picture. This AC is either a tank with a BB gun for its main cannon, or a slow and fragile angry kid with a knife. Simply swapping the hand weapons around would have done this machine so much good. These weapons really don't mesh well together, and we haven't even started discussing the AC itself yet. The frame is a weird mishmash of parts. The legs are the heavy ones, which I really like. However, the strength of this set is that it allows you to commit to go all heavy weapons guy on its ass. The other parts are frail, and the boosters don't help with increasing mobility. Upwards thrust is not very useful when you want to stay close to the enemy. The result is one of the least mobile preset ACs with near 10k HP. That is unforgivably low. At least the FCS specializes in close range, but I don't really know what I'm meant to do with that assault armor expansion. I guess it's a punish for when the laser cannon inevitably falls off, never to be seen again. The generator also just sucks. This AC is one of the weirdest and most incongruent ACs in this game. It's very awkward to use and will be an arena demon within its extremely narrow operating window. However, I feel like if I asked a random number generator to pick each part for me, I'd end up with an AC that has an okay chance at being more flexible and reliable than whatever this is. Asterisk. Despite its scrappy looks, this is a pretty solid AC that feels good to use. The Basho frame offers some good AP at almost 12k total, and the arms have the highest melee spec in the game. That pulse blade is doing some goddamn work. I had no idea the damage of melee weapons depended so much on this attribute. The other weapons include the burst rifle, which is a very reliable kinetic weapon with good damage, range and stagger. Its main drawback is the low rate of fire, but it has to be balanced somehow. This gun has a charged attack, which fires a burst of 3 bullets. However, it's not very useful, seeing as you have a much better punish weapon and it is very hard to hit mobile enemies with. Beyond the pulse blade, we've also got this handheld 4-cell missile launcher. I really like this weapon. It might not be as effective at applying stagger as some other alternatives, but the homing capabilities of these projectiles are very good. And don't get me wrong, it still hits pretty hard. The final weapon is this napalm bomb launcher. It functions similarly to that stun bomb thing discussed earlier, but it scatters lingering fire instead. I'm not sure what exactly the purpose of this tool is. It can only really deal solid damage against land-bound and immobile enemies, so not very suited for bosses or ACs. Even tanks can just drive out of the fire. The booster is the Kikaku, which has underwhelming specs, but the AC still feels quite mobile. The most impressive attribute of this part is the exceptionally high melee boost. This governs how fast the booster takes you towards the target of your melee attack, and it feels viciously aggressive to be rushing at vulnerable enemies like that. The FCS is pretty good at mid-range, where most of its weapons excel, and boasts a high missile lock correction time, improving the effectiveness of the missile launcher. Another tool I'm not really sure what to do with is the assault armor. The pulse blade is too good a punish not to use, so maybe it's better as to force a stagger in the first place, at a range too close for your main weapons. And finally, the generator is the Coral Aorta. I have already expressed my dislike for Coral generators, but at least they could have given us the better one. A really solid, fairly nimble and focused AC that knows what it's doing. At least mostly. I really like how it feels to use and it will not let you down. By the way, I know that the name of this AC looks like someone smashed their fucking face into the keyboard. And I thought so too at first, but apparently Well, I did my homework, I looked it up, and apparently it's the name of some ancient Armenian deity. And I don't know how to pronounce this word. So I looked at a few videos and recordings, and all of them say it a little differently. So, like the first result is a YouTube video where the guy just says "ask the geek," and all of the comments are, "This is not how you pronounce it. This is wrong," and all the other ones are a little different. So I don't know which one is the correct one. I just picked one that spoke the most to me, let's say. Umber Ox. The first tank build we see, and it's a good one despite being a tank, not thanks to it. Tank treads are elect type, even clunkier than tetrapods, but with the upside of even higher load limits and even less restrictions on heavy weapons. I'm pretty sure no weapons require tanks to slow down at all when driving around on the ground. And this weapon selection is freaking strong. We've got one powerful handheld laser rifle, one extremely powerful back-mounted laser shotgun, both of which have even more damaging charged shots. And yet, we've still got a handheld rocket launcher of middling power and a tiny blast radius. The back-mounted earshot is the capstone of grenade launchers. It is devastatingly strong, but has a mind-numbingly slow reload time and only 16 total rounds. This weapon selection is very easy to use. You basically just alternate taking shots with the different weapons and watch the health of your foes rapidly deteriorate. If you really want to, you can prepare the charged attack of the laser shotgun as a huge punisher that rivals some melee weapons in damage output. But if that's too much of a headache, just taking regular shots will whittle down your enemies with similar effectiveness. The frame I'm less positive about. While the AP comes out to more than 15k, which is the highest we've seen so far, the attitude stability is around 1800. This is respectable, but the heavy tetrapods we've discussed in the previous tier both come out to over 2300. Even the tester AC has more stability than Umber Ox. The load limit and EN output both allow for some far stronger frame parts, but Chartreuse was hell-bent on having a full arquebus set, for some reason. I also wish the firearm spec on the arms was higher. Furthermore, these tank treads are my least favorite of the three available. The description says they're designed for airborne use, but that doesn't really pan out this way. What they mean by that is, moving around while midair will cause you to descend very slowly, but your lateral movement will also be very slow. This means you can do a sort of inferior hover, except you cover ground extremely slowly, making you a sitting duck. Furthermore, using many of your weapons will knock you up further into the air, which makes you take even longer to descend. Therefore, there's far more downsides than upsides, and you're still better off just taking advantage of the drive speed, which is slower than more low-tech alternatives, along with having worse all-around specs than the Fuck that, I'm not saying that. If these treads let you move midair at normal speed, they'd probably be my favorite. The internals are decent. The FCS specializes in long range, but the other specs are also good. Still, mid to close range is where you wanna be, and there's better FCS for that. The generator has middling recharge and capacity stats, but those aren't very important on a tank. Instead, it's good where it matters. Energy firearm spec. Pulse armor is the expansion, and it's probably what I'd have picked. This AC is not fast enough to close the gap for an assault armor punisher, so this is the only really good option left. Open Faith. Let's set aside our prejudices towards Snail for a moment and appreciate that this AC is quite strong. It boasts almost 14k AP, which is super impressive for a biped. I think this might be the highest health pool for a biped preset in the entire game. Now, it does handle like an absolute pig.
It's a shitbox! It understeers like crazy and the weight distribution is a disaster. It's amazing, all these facilities and you make a piece of crap like this.
But how can we complain with such high resilience? The primary firearm is the stun pistol. It's okay if your only goal is applying electric discharge buildup, but doesn't deal much damage or impact. you kind of have to use it in conjunction with the stun needle. This bad girl deals a lot of damage and creates another burst of electricity after a short delay. It's a good punish. It's a good all-around weapon. The vertical plasma missiles are less impressive. They're easy to hit things with, but take just that little bit too long to cover the distance and don't deal much impact either. The final weapon is this laser lance. It's one of the best melee weapons in this game. While the damage it deals is inferior to a pile bunker, the charging attack takes you forward extremely far, which the pile bunker cannot do. It also deals damage several times, which means you can launch an attack just before an enemy is quite staggered. The frame has a great AP count and stability. The FCS is great at mid and long range, but sucks close up. This is good for the stun needle and plasma missiles, but you're gonna have to get in close to take advantage of the lance, pistol and assault armor, so I'd have picked a more rounded option. The booster is this thing, clearly designed for handling heavy boats. Still, I somehow feel one with better specs would result in a slightly more nimble AC. The generator is kind of bad, but at least the energy firearm spec is high, though I'm not sure if the stun weapons benefit from it. The laser lance sure doesn't. Assault armor is the expansion on this AC, and I feel like it kind of rounds out the playstyle. We've got the stun needle, laser lance and assault armor, which would normally each be used as a punish. However, with the lack of good stagger building tools, you have to use them as both staggers and punishers. This AC is awkward to use, but it can be devastatingly powerful. Deep down, There's a your mom joke to be made here somewhere, but I'm not gonna be the one to make it. I was pleasantly surprised by this AC, as the assembly doesn't look very good at first glance. The weaponry is probably its most kooky aspect. We've got the ever-reliable Harris linear rifle. It's the only conventional gun on this machine, so I'd have swapped it with the Curtis for its higher rate of fire. The handheld 4-cell missile launcher I've already expressed my affinity for, and we've got two more missile weapons. The unreliable but not useless twin-active homing variant, and a vertical missile launcher with a whopping 12 cells. I've slandered this weapon type in the past, and I still don't hold a very high opinion on them, because they don't hit things well. However, this one kind of just does. I was surprised by how often these projectiles connected. Maybe it's just because there's so fucking many of them, because the guidance value on this weapon is the same as for all the other vertical launchers. Maybe they've been buffed recently, because I swear they were nowhere near as good at homing in the past. One problem with this weapon type I haven't mentioned is that they become useless in tight confines. Let's take the Smart Cleaner Arena as an example. You need to be in the center part of the arena, where the ceiling is higher, be standing on the ground, and using vertical missiles here will barely let you hit the enemy from above. If the room is any tighter than this, they will just fly into the ceiling. When playing with vertical missiles, you're going to be surprised how many rooms in the game are too tight to use them. You'll be one weapon down in effect when fighting there. Let's talk a bit about multi-lock. This is the act of holding down the fire button on missile weapons. Most of them will then lock on individual missiles to different enemies, as opposed to just one. This is especially useful for the slower reloading variants, as you generally have more missiles to work with, and this will let you kill many enemies with one salvo. However, this mechanism is unreliable at best, especially against really big groups of enemies. You can't really pick which enemies to multi-lock to, and you can't pick how many either. This means that if you have a 12-cell missile launcher and 12 MTs in front of you, multi-locking onto them will result in none of them dying, because one missile for each just isn't enough. At this point you're better off erring on the side of overkill, as at least you'll be one enemy down. As a result, the bigger missile launchers are not very good at large crowd control, so we need a different, more reliable weapon to kill hordes of MTs quickly. The linear rifle on this AC fulfills this role. Anyway, these weapons are quite solid at building stagger, but we don't have a decent punish option. We don't really need one though. The missiles alone are doing a respectable job at whittling down your enemies. This weapon selection is also quite good at range, which means the subpar mobility isn't a big problem. Why is it subpar? Well, this assembly is on the chunkier side. We've got almost 13k AP, which is impressive for a biped. The attitude stability is also good, at around 1800. However, the booster has all-round decent stats in all aspects. As a result, this machine doesn't feel overly sluggish, unlike Open Faith. The generator is the Santai again, which is probably my favorite generator in this game. The FTS is specialized for missile lock correction time. Someone really had their head screwed on straight when designing this machine, which is more than I can say for most of them. The expansion is Pulse Armor, which is a good choice to further compound the tenacity of this bad boy. However, with the lack of a good punish option, I feel like Assault Armor would turn this preset into an absolute beast. With the low mobility, this might be hard to use though, so I'm not sure. Overall, this machine feels kind of like an improved trainer. Better weapons, much better survivability and energy capacity at the cost of some agility. I can't really put it as high as Liger Tail though, because that firepower just hasn't been matched. Milktooth. If Aster Crown was incongruent due to incompetence, Milktooth seems almost deliberately bad. You might look at the weaponry and say, how is an AC with the spread bazooka, flamethrower and chainsaw not contending for top tier? Well, this arsenal is counter-synergetic with itself in ways I didn't even realize were possible until I tried this AC. The flamethrower is an alright weapon, dealing a good amount of damage at short range, but almost no impact whatsoever. The spread bazooka is a solid weapon as well. So what's the catch? The chainsaw is unwieldy, but has some of the strongest attacks in the game. The uncharged moves involve slowly swiping it sideways, dealing a good amount of damage. However, this attack is sluggish and doesn't stun lock the enemy, so it's not going to let you do much against all but the slowest targets to recover. The charged attack is much better, as it thrusts the blade inside of the enemy and stun locks them while turning their steel core into confetti. It would be a top tier punish, but there's some problems. You see, the spread bazooka is your best tool for building stagger. Unfortunately, the impact decays by a lot. More importantly though, there's a significant delay after firing before you're allowed to do anything. So if the bazooka staggers the enemy, there's a short delay before you can start charging up the secondary attack on the chainsaw, then there's another short delay before the attack is ready, and then there's still the thrust itself being slow as hell. As a result, almost all enemies in the game will recover before they can be stun locked again. The reason why Nightfall and Locksmith have an assault rifle in their right arm is because this lets you finish staggering your enemy while preserving your mobility. The Pile Bunker and Laser Blade have a significant delay on their charged moves, but anticipating the appearance of your precious opening lets you minimize the delay until your melee punisher takes over. Milktooth does not have such a tool, as the flamethrower does next to no impact. The final weapon is this dual split missile launcher. It's a different model than the one Michigan has got, and this one is awful at hitting anything. I don't know why, but it just completely misses more than it hits anything. It's not a reliable tool, and it almost might as well not exist. It's not good enough to fulfill this role of a semi-passive stagger buildup. As a result, we have a really good Punisher weapon, which could be devastating. However, the arsenal just doesn't facilitate its use. The situation is so bad, in fact, that I sometimes find myself using the charged chainsaw attack in order to catch an unstaggered enemy to stagger them in the first place, and then using the spread bazooka to punish. Somehow, this ends up being easier than the inverse. And you know what's really fucking funny? The chainsaw is one of the only melee weapons in the game which lets you charge an attack and buffer it without forcing your AC into stance, but this is cancelled out by firing the spread bazooka. This set of weapons would have been so fucking good if only the right hand had some assault rifle or shotgun. Alright, that's enough negativity for the day. Let's take a look at the internals. The booster specs are... What do I even say about this? these bars speak for themselves. At least the frame is quite sturdy, but with this mobility, the health still wears down really quickly. The expansion is assault armor, which is not great. It's still a bit too slow to come online after a bazooka shot to be a reliable punish. The generator is not terrible, but with the slow movement speed, you're gonna be expending a lot of energy to get anywhere. And the FCS is... Oh my god, let's just move on, please. Steel Haze. As soon as I entered a mission with this AC, I already knew it was easily going to be S tier. The way it moves alone is leagues above anything else in this game. It's by far the most nimble and lightweight preset. And just look at how fast it is. Holy shit, you're basically teleporting around! This is mostly thanks to the Alula booster, allowing this machine to dart around like a terrier on cocaine. The two main weapons are the Kinetic Burst Rifle and Burst Pistol. They're fine weapons, and you can use them simultaneously for some really good stagger buildup. However, I'd have swapped one of the weapons to be more similar to the other one, because you still have to get close to use them both effectively. In that case, you're not taking advantage of the range on the Ransetsu. Two pistols, shotguns or light machine guns would do the trick, as the mobility on this AC lets you control the range and rules of engagement. And to take advantage of the punish window, the Laser Slicer returns. This weapon actually has a charged attack I haven't mentioned, because it's kind of underwhelming. This goes for many of the charged attacks on melee weapons which can strike several times. Let's take the Pulse Blade for example. You can either perform 2 light attacks in succession, or 1 stronger swipe. If the charged attack were to match the damage of the light combo, it would have to deal at least twice the damage of 1 light attack, which it doesn't. There's some benefits though, for example it doesn't expose you for as long. Still, usually you want to do as much damage as you can during a stagger. The final weapon is this triple cell plasma missile launcher. I've complained about the plasma rifle in Institute, but I think the missile form works better. If we were to compare them to more kinetic alternatives, this launcher has the advantage that multi-locking onto several MTs will still take out a large group. And even if you don't, the AoE is still often good enough. They also reload and lock on faster. The reason why they work better as missiles is because the back-mounted weapons tend to be less practical than the handheld ones. So you're facing competition from Scooters, Vientos, Zimmermans, and the like, which is a tough ask. Counterintuitively, this 3-cell variant is better than the 6-cell alternative. This is because as long as the enemy is within the AoE of at least one bubble, the damage stays the same. Ergo, more missiles does not increase the damage. The only real benefit is the larger area coverage, but the smaller model has a shorter reload and lock-on time. Steel Haze lacks the synergy with the Huxley and Needle Launcher, but it has another trick up its sleeve. Assault armor can be freely used at the end of a Laser Slicer combo to further compound the damage, as the residual stun is long enough to facilitate this. The other internals include this generator with decent specs, and the FCS is specialized for mid-range, which isn't really what I would have picked. The frame is exceptionally lightweight, and the arms boast the highest firearm spec in the game, along with one of the lowest melee specs in the game. I never really have trouble locking onto enemies when firing my kinetic guns, so I guess it's a good sign. The total AP comes out at around 6k, which is puny. However, that's par for the course for lightweight builds. This might seem like a bunch of shortcomings, and it is. So why is this AC S tier? Well, first of all, no matter what parts you pick, there's always going to be weaker aspects. Secondly, and more importantly, even the best preset builds in this game are about on par with what could be expected of a competent player to have built. They just aren't as good as the cream of the crop of what is possible if you can freely mix and match every part. The truth is that when I sorted in this AC, its mobility and feel completely blew out of the water all the other presets I've tried before, and still nothing has matched it. While the weaponry isn't as devastating as that of Umber Ox, it still hits really hard, if you know how to use it well. This is why I'm happy to say Steel Haze is our first S tier preset. Only took us... how many episodes? Oh my god, Dead Sled. Well, here's another fairly confused AC that doesn't know what it wants to be. However, it lands closer to Trainer on the practicality scale than Aster Crown. There are 2 handheld laser weapons on this one, The first of which is this rifle. It fires slowly but deals good damage, the projectile travels quickly and has a very powerful charged attack, which takes so long to reach that stage that whatever window of opportunity you thought you had will be gone before you're done. The second one is this shotgun with low range but good damage. The charged attack on this weapon is a single blast with an even shorter range. It's far faster to charge up, deals a very good amount of damage and knocks your target back. I'm not sure if that's a good thing, but it certainly feels satisfying. The first back-mounted weapon is the classic 4-cell missile launcher along with the single-cell active homing rocket. I think I would have picked the double variant because using these projectiles is such a crapshoot as to if they'll hit anything, that being able to roll more dice at once is your best bet at increasing the damage. I think the gimmick of this AC setup is to use the active homing missile as a distraction and then unload with the remaining 3 weapons, all of which are very easy to hit with. However, no gimmick will save you if you cannot output the damage necessary to kill your enemies. The shotgun's charged attack is a great punisher, but having to charge it up in the first place robs you of one weapon to get that stagger bar over the finish line. As a result, what's left for you is basically just try to unload and keep that pressure on your foes. The damage output is good, and you will occasionally get some staggers in, and you might be in a position for a punish. The mech is alright, but I can't really tell what it wants to be. It's a relatively heavyweight frame with the spring chicken reverse joints. I don't think that's what I would have picked, because the shotgun needs you to be really close to your enemy, and the active missile launcher doesn't like you firing it down at an enemy, because, well... The generator is the Ming Tang, and it's decent, but I really would have picked one with a better energy firearm spec, because this one is crap. The FCS is the Talbot, which is an all-round good FCS, and I never have trouble targeting things. The booster specs are also really decent. I don't really know what to do with that assault armor though, because the weapons are good enough that I never find myself thinking, yes, let me stop firing all my guns for a few seconds to trigger this blast. Overall, I don't really know how to summarize this AC. It's just pretty decent, it doesn't have any major weaknesses, and just feels quite mundane. The damage output is better than Trainer, so I have to put it a bit higher. Full course. I'm gonna be completely upfront with my bias for this AC. I love it. It's among my favorites just due to how fun it is to use. Why is that? It's a gimmick build, and that gimmick is... LODS of MSASL. What's the spell? Loads of missiles, probably. All 4 weapons fire huge salvos of missiles. The soups especially fire hails upon hails of unrelenting stagger buildup. And holy shit, just look at them go! These are easily my favorite missile launches in the game. The projectiles aren't very fast, but you fire 10 of them at once. They can home very well, and the delay between salvos is not as huge as you might expect. The biggest downside is the huge EN consumption, which puts this weapon out of league for most builds. However, this isn't a problem out in the actual field. They're also unique amongst missile launchers, in that one salvo doesn't empty the entire magazine. You can actually fire 3 salvos of 10 rockets each, before requiring a reload. And we've got 2 of them. That makes me a very happy boy, who isn't going to become a slut for someone offering them 2 soups. I know I would, I'm a slut for Carla. And the 2 handheld missile launchers are a special type. As they fire, the missiles actually stay stationary for a second or 2 before launching themselves at the target. The description says it lets you surround your enemy single-handedly, but I don't think that's how it pans out. This would be the case if the missiles all started movement simultaneously, which would make avoiding a salvo from an entire arc's width tricky. However, they do not. The delay until launch is the same for all of the missiles. As a result, it's not really that different from firing them normally. The only real benefits to this mechanism I can think of is that some enemies with armor or shields on their front will turn around to face you, which might let the missiles strike them from the back due to the delay. But that's a really niche scenario. This arsenal is extremely strong and easy to use. The stagger bar fills it up like it's going out of style. We don't have a dedicated punish weapon, but do we really need one? I mean, just look at all those missiles, how can you say no to that? The frame is a unique set designed by and for Carla specifically. It boasts great AP and stability, but is very heavy, and the booster is the Kikaku again, which doesn't do it any favors. This results in an open faith tier mobility, and that's actually a pretty big problem for this AC. The Supes especially excel at medium to long range, because they have trouble turning fast enough to track enemies close up. As a result, you don't have much control over the rules of engagement. I was fighting Gun 6 Red in the arena, and despite being an average biped of average mobility, he was running circles around me. He could do what he wanted with me, and I felt like that eponymous main dish on his fork. I was constantly trying to get farther away from him, and he just wouldn't let me. I don't think he's specifically programmed to take advantage of these traits, but you will occasionally be stuck in such situations. I don't really see why this mech had to be so heavy. The generator is not great, but I only found 2 other generators which would both satisfy the N and the weight constraints, both of which seem worse than what we've got. The FCS is all about missile lock correction time, as it should. Carla knows her fucking shit when it comes to designing ACs. At least that's if Circus was at her work, because, well, we'll get to that. Assault armor is there to help you punish if you happen to be close during a stagger. Besides the mobility, the other downside of this AC is the lack of multi-lock. Each of these missile weapons can only lock on to one target, so taking out groups of MTs will result in a lot of missiles and time going to waste. Assault armor can help mitigate this, but you can only use it 3 times, and there's a sizable delay. If this list was purely ranking how much I enjoy using these ACs, Full Course would easily be top tier. However, I can't deny it's got some big problems limiting its practicality. That being said, this machine is so extremely easy to use. You don't really have to worry about movement, aiming, timing your shots, or what have you. You just fire salvo after salvo and oops, I just staggered another enemy. It's so incredibly funny and gimmicky that it holds a special place in my heart. Barren Flower. Are you yet sick and tired of trying to figure out what the author had in mind? Well, so am I. Not just because I don't like literature classes, but also because we've got another weird conglomerate of parts masquerading as an AC. The head is sturdy for its weight, the core is the same Schneider piece from fucking Steel Haze, the arms are the heavyweight behemoths from Open Faith, and the legs are the boring and bad midweight tetrapods. What are we getting at here? Why does this exist? At least the attitude stability is quite high. But the AP count is similar to the far more nimble trainer. The booster has decent specs all around, but the machine has subpar mobility due to the legs. The FCS is lacking, and I did find myself noticing the reticle struggling to keep up with my enemy's movements as I was playing. Pulse armor is our expansion here, which isn't a great choice. It's not bad either. I don't know what I would have picked here, to be honest. I don't find myself struggling with the generator's performance, but it's a good thing the energy firearm spec is high, because there's 2 of those on this AC. The primary gun is the Ransetsu. Again, it's good, but it will not carry you throughout the harder battles. We've also got this plasma rifle, which I think is superior to the Nebula. This is not just due to its pretty decent damage, but I prefer the charged shot on this one. It fires out 3 projectiles with spread, each of which will produce its own empowered AoE. These 2 weapons have some nice synergy with the tetrapod, as the charged shots can be taken without ceasing of movement. Being high above your enemy also allows the charged plasma rifle attack to spread out the AoEs, covering a really impressive area. The first back-mounted weapon are the vertical plasma missiles. I'm not a fan of those, mostly due to how long the projectiles take to hit anything. However, as mentioned previously, I'd kind of rather just have the 3 cell for its faster reload and lock-on. 5 cells feels like too much, especially since it doesn't increase the damage on a single target. And the final unit is this container missile thing. It is bad. It fires out this one big slow missile, which scatters a bunch of small projectiles as it flies. The ammo capacity is low, it takes forever to reload, and just doesn't output enough damage or impact for how rarely you get to fire it. I suppose the purpose of this weapon, given that it doesn't require a lock-on, is that you fire it blindly into the air, hoping it will help during a fight with multiple enemies. However, I would rather not do that. I would rather focus down my enemies one by one, because reducing their numbers greatly helps out during a battle. So the two weapons are okay at dealing stagger, but what's the punish? I tried playing around with the charged attacks, and they're fine. The plasma rifle deals good damage just through its area coverage alone, but honestly, the good old unload with everything you have is probably your best bet. I am really struggling to figure out how I'm meant to be using this, because it feels like there is some hidden synergy or gimmick here that I'm missing, but I just can't figure it out. The weaponry is alright, but will not shake your world, and if the mobility is going to be this low, we might as well lean a bit into the heavyweight grind set and put some more boom on this thing. Tsubasa. The biggest crime of this AC is that it's exceedingly basic and boring, despite being quite effective. The lightweight Firmetsa frame offers near 9k AP and an underwhelming stability. Coupled with the Gridwalker booster, specializing in upwards thrust, it's a quite mobile machine, almost as nimble as Steel Haze. The upwards thrust on the booster is more useful than I thought, as it does make avoiding some attacks a breeze. The generator is the Yaba, with alright specs, and the expansion is Pulse Protection, which is a very bad choice. You're forsaking your speed with this, so Pulse Armor would have been a much better choice, if you're going for survivability. The final internal is the same mid-range FCS that almost all RLF assemblies are using. It's not what I would have picked, given the weaponry, which we'll get to shortly. The Rensetsu returns, as does the Etsujin and the basic bitch 4-cell missile launcher. These weapons are all quite effective, versatile, and hard to avoid. In fact, the better FCS and firearm spec on this AC confirm my suspicions that the burst machine gun is actually a decent weapon, because the Rubiconian preset does everything to not hit the target. The final punish weapon is the Little Gem Bazooka. It lives up to its name, as it's lightweight and weak as all fuck. The stagger damage is not that terrible compared to linear rifles or the like, but only a fraction of even some basic melee weapons. The blast radius only exists in principle, as I don't think I've ever seen this shell hit more than one enemy at once. Playing this AC is very easy and very boring. You just spam the three main weapons, which deals a lot of damage and stagger in unison, and then swap for a bazooka punish. Or don't, cause if you keep up that spam, you'll deal a similar amount of damage. I don't have much to say about this AC. It's good, but painfully boring. The mobility is appreciated, but my fingers are about to fall off from all that constant spamming. Circus. Well, here's another preset I feel quite conflicted about. Another RAD special of brash explosive firepower. The two handheld weapons are the Iridium grenade launcher with good power, and the unimpressive Little Gem Bazooka, presumably as a backup. This is because grenade launchers actually take a bit longer to fire than bazookas do. Another downside is the shorter range, as the grenades will detonate after too long spent in the air. The Delivery Boy and 12-cell vertical missile launcher return, as impractical as ever. This set of weapons can be overwhelmingly powerful, but all of these tools are pretty hard to hit mobile enemies with, combined with the slow reload times, and each of them only being able to fire once before a reload, we're left with something awkward and inflexible. Nimble enemies will be this AC's downfall. Furthermore, none of these stand out as being a particularly good punish tool. In fact, the kick is your best option, and it's a really good one. I was surprised at how nasty the damage on the kick was. It just requires you to get used to the awkward animation. Another weird counter synergy is that firing your handheld weapons while the missile launcher is during its salvo will cancel the salvo, requiring a full reload before being able to fire again. Also, despite tank ACs not requiring to assume stance while firing heavy weapons, there are still limitations. For example, you cannot fire the weapons in both your hands at once, which is a shame. The frame is this mismatched heavyweight set with the lightest tank treads, synergizing with the handheld weapons. However, I'm not sure why we couldn't have picked an arm piece with better firearm spec. The FCS is specialized for missile lock correction time, which helps with the delivery boy especially, but doesn't help with the grenade launcher and bazooka. The generator is the Hokushi, which has underwhelming specs, but that's not a big deal on a tank. No expansion on this one, for some reason, which is a detriment. I feel like assault armor would help a lot with the damage output, especially for foes that are hard to pin down. Without it, we're left with the kick as the most reliable punish option, which is impressive, but not very practical. Tanks have a problem with kicking, in that the tracks don't have to be facing the same way that the rest of the AC is. As a result, before you can assault boost, the tracks have to take the time to spin the right way around again before you start moving. This is awkward and makes kicking unreliable. The result of all this is a preset that will sometimes demolish anything in its path with ease, and sometimes struggle to hit anything at all. The unreliability, awkwardness and lack of vertical mobility make this a hard sell for me. Entangle. I'll be completely upfront with my bias for this preset. It's probably the most fun I've had while making this series. Usually it takes me at least a few sessions to complete the entire game with a preset, more if it's a particularly boring or challenging one. But when using Entangle, I was glued to the screen and beat the game in just 2 days. And you know what? I can't even really explain why. On the outside, it seems like a very average biped wearing the same arquebus set that Chartreuse has, except for the decent Mind Alpha legs. All the other internals also do their best at being unremarkable in most ways. So, is there anything remarkable about this AC? The arsenal is super fun and satisfying to use. Javelin Alpha, my beloved. Javelin Beta, mwah. Exquisite. Triple cell plasma missiles, coolio. The final weapon is the superior pulse gun. This is a class of arms populated only by 2 individuals, and they are quite unique. They're energy firearms, inaccurately spewing out bubbles at a rapid rate, and with a short range. They deal good damage and not much impact, but their interference specs make them special. They're designed to counter pulse defenses, which includes pulse armor expansions used by other ACs, along with the protections of bosses like Air and Balteus, dealing exceptional damage against these obstacles. These bosses also suffer from ACS overload when the shield is broken. This isn't all though. I haven't really played much with pulse guns, except for S-ranking Balteus missions, so I didn't know about this final effect. These weapons also counter all kinds of shield units worn by ACs. Hitting an enemy with their shield up, using the pulse guns, will build up a lot of impact, and when that impact bar fills up, not only do they get staggered, but also the shield goes into cooldown. Until I played with this preset, I did not know this mechanic existed, and I think that's part of the reason I couldn't set it down. I wanted to keep playing with this new toy in a game I thought I knew everything about. The Javelin Beta fills the role of a stagger buildup, and the plasma missiles are only decent with damage alone. If the Javelin Alpha is meant to be the Punisher, then maybe it seems like a pulse gun isn't going to synergize well. However, this is without the consideration of the impact buildup from the shield mechanic mentioned earlier. Until I played with this AC, I didn't really think about how commonly we face against pulse shields in this game. And even if the enemy doesn't have a shield, this weapon just deals pretty good damage even without consideration of the stagger. And it's not a half-butt punish either, after a Javelin Duo induced stance break. And I think that's it. This AC doesn't have any major weaknesses, and the weaponry feels like it covers every possible curveball. It doesn't have an expansion, which is a minus, as there is no reason not to slap some pulse armor on this guy. On an absolute level, this is a solid and possibly the most practical AC of the lot, without excelling in any area. Despite this, I think my feelings have to override the objective quality of this AC, if only so that Steel Haze doesn't get lonely at the top. Dual Nature. Another gimmick build, but not nearly as successful as Full Course. There's not many presets using pulse guns, but this is another one of them. The primary pulse gun is the inferior of the two, and I'm not sure why this one was chosen. There's also a back-mounted pulse gun, and a pulse blade, and a pulse buckler. Pater really was committed to the bit. One thing I haven't brought up earlier is how the ranged pulse weapons overheat very quickly. This isn't too big of a deal on Entangle, but here they're your only projectile weapons, so you have to exercise some real trigger discipline. This Pulse Buckler is a quite special shield. The initial guard window is tiny, but the mitigation during this window is silly strong. The skill ceiling with using this shield is very high, and it will save this flimsy AC if you can use it well. However, you're still subject to overheating this unit, so it's not something that increases your survivability all that much, even if you use it perfectly. As a result, I think committing to killing things deader would have helped it more. This arsenal is all about whittling your enemies down without worrying too much about staggers and punishers. However, the low ammo capacity will leave you scrambling for your life on more prolonged missions. The Pulse Blade actually deals the most impact, and if this lets you get off a stagger, unloading with your two primary guns is a pretty potent punisher. However, the frame doesn't sit right with me. It certainly is among the lightest of presets, but something about the way it controls feels counter-synergetic with the rest of the build. It's a different mishmash of Arquebus parts. The reverse joint legs in the game have slowly fallen out of my favor over time. The jump height feels good, but there's a noticeably higher delay until you leave the ground. Furthermore, quick boosting when not airborne will launch you into the air slightly, which robs you of some control and speed. As a result, I struggle to stay in close range, where most opponents will have a hard time keeping track of me, and where my weapons excel. I find myself stuck in an almost mid-range, also because it gives me time to parry incoming strong attacks. The booster is the Alula again, which is probably the best choice here, but I'd pick an FCS with better close range assist. I hope the generator at least has good energy firearm spec. I'll pretend I didn't see that. I hope the expansion is something that aids survivability. I mean, I guess it does, but what the fuck? In conclusion, this preset is situationally strong, while feeling kind of awkward to use all around. Like almost all presets in this game, its main weaknesses are the low ammo capacity and survivability, while having good close range damage output. Cannon Head. Oh boy, another thick build with the firepower to match. Let's start off with the impressive Go-Chen grenade launcher. The damage and blast radius are making me wet. It's like a mini nuke, killing things on another planet you didn't even realize were there. The Songbirds help out with even more explosions, and the dual split missiles are kind of underwhelming, because agile enemies won't have much problem with avoiding them, which I suppose goes for all the weapons here. Rounding out the arsenal is the Zimmerman, the shotgun of choice for most players. And it is good, but the firepower doesn't impress compared to the other ones. I'm not sure why this is here. Cannon Head is a tank. We could have easily put another bazooka or grenade launcher here. The only benefit of this weapon choice is the lack of a delay before firing. But could we really not have picked up something better here? I know Balaam doesn't do energy weapons, but some kind of powerful laser gun would fit here very well. This arsenal has some really good damage output and staggers enemies so easily that you almost don't need the punish. However, the kick is here to save the day again. I don't know how to check this, but this might be the strongest kick of any preset in the game. It is disgusting how much damage it deals on a staggered enemy. It's basically as strong as the Go-Chen. This playstyle also lets you get off some more free damage with the Zimmerman. This is why staying close with this AC is important, but also because competent pilots will not struggle with dancing around the damage flying around. The frame is the heavyweight Tian Qiang set with the big boy tank treads instead. Despite a good FCS and firearm spec on the arms, I find this AC to not have very good aim. I can't really ascertain why. The generator is the decent Ming Tang, not that it matters much. There's also no expansion, which is a shame. I think Pulse Armor synergizes well with machines of higher stability, as using this sheds more staggering effect. However, I wonder if Assault Armor would be a more powerful punisher than the kick. If it was, that's what I'd have picked. To compile all this information together, we're left with a satisfyingly powerful arsenal, but I can't help but feel like we could have gone higher. I also find the weaponry of Umber Ox to be more consistent at outputting damage, while also being more versatile and easier to use, and not requiring you to stay as close. This preset won't disappoint, but it also could have been so much more. Shinobi. Words cannot put into context the magnitude of the discrepancy between how powerful this AC seems like it should be versus how strong it actually is. A shotgun, Ransetsu, and the plasma thrower? Are we eating good tonight or what? Well, the shotgun happens to be the Haldeman. While the rate of fire certainly makes it easier to use than the Zimmerman, the damage and impact are significantly inferior and make it feel impotent. I'm not sure if this is a bug or what, but sometimes I have these weird situations where I fire point blank at an enemy and it visually looks like everything should connect, but the stagger bar just doesn't really move. I don't know why this happens. As I was looking through the parts of this machine, I realized the Ransetsu is also the name for the burst assault rifle, which is quite practical but feels kind of underpowered compared to its bigger cousin. The Javelin Beta is sweet, and I like the Plasma Caster too. However, the two firearms will unfortunately have to be your main source of impact output. The frame is another Fairmezzo set, except for the Mind Alpha torso, and the booster is appropriately powerful as well, at least in the basic thrust department. I think the incredible quick boost of the Alula, or even the user-friendly upwards thrust of the Gridwalker, would have been a bit better here. We've also got the standard issue RLF FCS, which isn't bad, but I'd have picked one more balanced between close and mid-range. The Ming Tang generator doesn't raise any eyebrows, and the Pulse Armor expansion is a safe pick too. The movement on this AC feels a bit worse than Tsubasa, but it's still a firmly lightweight and mobile preset. Overall, I want to put this AC above that of Flatwalls, but I'm struggling to think of how much higher. The Javelin Beta and Plasma Caster are both better weapons than anything found on Tsubasa, but the Burst Rifle and Etsujin feel like drilling into someone's core. An armored core, perhaps, while the weaponry on Shinobi feels more like slapping someone with a wet sock. It's certainly more fun to use though, so this factor will determine everything in this case. Headbringer. Seems familiar? Apparently, Iguazu loved the trainer AC so goddamn much that he just built it himself, and added a shield, and the generator is a bit different. I cannot say much about this build as I've already said everything there is to say with the trainer. It's still reliable, versatile, but lacking somewhat in damage output. At least the shield isn't obstructing the better of the two guns, which cannot be said about a certain other preset much higher up in the arena. Keep spamming those triggers like your life depends on it and you'll be fine. Reconfig. This preset is the next in a long line of pre-made ACs that just kind of feels slightly underwhelming in every aspect. The laser blade is probably the best part about it, as it's still devastating. However, the remaining weapons are nowhere near as good. This plasma rifle we've seen before, but as you've probably noticed, I am absolutely not memorizing these part names. It's alright for clearing out groups or keeping up pressure, but doesn't deal much damage or impact. The companion piece is the 6-cell plasma missile launcher, which is significantly worse than the 3-cell counterpart due to the slower reload time. The last weapon is probably the best of the ranged ones. It's this generic back-mounted laser rifle, dealing alright damage and stagger. It's very good for one-on-one engagements, but competent pilots are very good at dodging the projectile, despite its high velocity. This arsenal feels like it should have been centered around the laser blade. It's a fantastic punish weapon, but building stagger is quite hard with this AC. I know Arquebus is known for their energy weapons, but some of them still wield very kinetic guns. Swinburne has a missile launcher and a fucking earshot for Christ's sake. If those two weapons were on reconfig, substituting the plasma projectors, this would have been a contender for A tier. I still would have picked something more practical over the biggest grenade launcher in the game, but this alone clearly isn't off limits. The frame is solid and sturdy, logging in at 11.5k AP. and over 2300 stability, despite using the mid-range tetrapods. Like mentioned previously, this specific set always makes me wonder why the designer hasn't gone a step heavier. They have some synergy with the plasma rifle's alt-fire and the laser gun. Firing the latter actually stops the AC from moving, except if you're hovering in the air. This is enough reason for me to use this functionality wherever possible. The FCS is good all around, and the generator has decent performance too, but I kind of want to see what the damage would have been like with a higher energy firearm spec. The final part is post protection, which is a good choice here. This AC feels quite tenacious and sturdy, and the expansion compounds this further. I think this ties up what this AC is supposed to be. It's meant to outlive your opponents while whittling them down by spraying easy to hit AoEs. I see people talking of Rock Monson as a difficulty spike in the arena, but I always struggle far more against Hawkins, precisely for those reasons. Unfortunately, this isn't going to do you much good against some of the tougher bosses of the game, and you're gonna need more mobility and burst damage. Furthermore, a melee weapon feels like a weird choice for a tetrapod, because the hover encourages you to stay at the mid-range, to outkite your opponent, and be able to react to incoming attacks. This makes the AC feel like it's got potential, but needs some big changes. Candle Ring. Another gimmick build, and it's pretty fun, but could have been so much more. There's only two weapon types here, the handheld 4-cell missile launcher and the Songbird. It's pretty clear what you're meant to do here. Spam those missiles until the enemy is staggered and punish with the grenades. Alternatively, just alternate firing everything. Random bullshit go. The missile launchers I am fond of, but being your only practical primaries is a bit limiting. Some opponents are very good at dodging them, and the reload times are starting to be quite problematic. The Songbirds actually have a unique animation when you try to fire them both at once. The game slightly staggers one of the attacks, making it seem like you've fired 3 times. They're an alright range punish, but the explosions knock the enemy back, which veers the remaining grenades off course, especially against floating enemies. This happens surprisingly often, and it's why I sometimes opt to kick instead, as it's a pretty good kick. The frame is kind of meager for a tank, and I really think more would have been better. The Firmezza frame is on the lighter side, and the Fortaleza tank treads are the lightest available. This comes out to around 10k AP, which is actually pretty average. It really should have been more. Even without swapping the legs, the weight limit allows for far heavier parts. Furthermore, if we're a tank anyway, then why not commit and give us some heavier arm units? The missile launchers are good, but that's if we compare them to other weapons not requiring stance. The FCS specializes in missile lock correction time, which is a good choice, and the generator is decent too. However, I wish that pulse armor would have been swapped for assault armor. I just feel like it would be a better punish, which would also free up the Songbirds to do more of the heavy lifting. I believe this will be the last tank build we'll be discussing, and it's kind of a shame none of them feel like they really commit to going balls to the wall destructive, Umber Ox being the closest. I am not saying every tank has to try to emulate an Abrams, but also, why bother if you won't try? Lai Long. I don't know when we've passed the threshold beyond which ACs are deliberately designed to be shit, in order to reflect their low rank on the arena, but we are certainly here now. The Ludlow, a double split missile launcher, and a single handheld split missile launcher will be your only weapons. The 4th unit is a very bad shield. These 3 guns aren't bad, but an AC really needs at least one better source of damage if it's going to stand a chance and not run out of ammo quickly when fighting tankier bosses. Furthermore, the missiles work best at medium range, while the Ludlow needs to be in close range due to the ricochets and low accuracy. And the frame is probably the worst choice for this kind of weaponry. It's a heavyweight tetrapod made of various Balaam sets. Why a tetrapod with these weapons? They are very light, they could have easily fit on a biped. These heavyweight legs are the same ones used by fucking Michigan. Hell on 4 legs. Why? The booster has alright specs, but it's not going to help much for this heavy pig. The FCS has good lock correction time, so that's nice, and the generator is just alright as well. At least assault armor is there. To be a Punisher, probably the best choice. I don't know how to summarize this AC beyond just saying the weapons would be mediocre even for a lightweight build, but are even more disappointing on a heavyweight. You are missing crucial impact buildup, and the low damage output will leave you defenseless on the longer missions. Guidance. This feels like a weird cousin build to Aster Crown in that it is situationally extremely powerful, but lacks flexibility and practicality, mostly owing to its weapon selection. The handheld 4-cell missile launcher, the earshot, and the stun baton don't synergize well together. While the missile launcher is a good weapon, there's a sizable delay between salvos for an ARM unit. The back-breakingly heavy grenade launcher is devastating, but the reload time is longer than my attention span. By the time the next shell is ready, I'll have forgotten this weapon exists. Therefore, you must use the missiles carefully to maintain stagger, because if you miss even one salvo, the bar will start decaying. However, if you do manage to fill it up, your reward is a punish from the stun baton. It's a weapon generally shunned by the community, but I found it's pretty neat. The stats screen says it's got 3 consecutive strikes, but it's actually way more. 6 according to the wiki. Each individual strike is pretty weak, but if we add up the entire combo, the full amount of damage is quite competitive with the rest of the melee weapons. Furthermore, the charged attack is also powerful and creates a delayed burst of electricity, not unlike the stun needle. This weapon is edged out slightly by other melee punishers, but it is not far behind and very fun to use. The 4th unit is a shield. Nothing I will say about it will blow your mind, so let's move on. The frame is a full tetrapod set from Arquebus. You already know my feelings on this set of legs, but the full course comes out at around 10k AP, which is not impressive and should have been higher. At least the stability is respectable at around 2300. The booster is unimpressive and doesn't seem specialized in anything, but the FCS is in lock correction time. Not that it matters a huge amount with this arsenal. The generator is pretty weak, and I don't know why this one was chosen. Pulse protection is our expansion here, and is what I would have picked. The only aspect here that really affects the performance of this AC is the synergy of the legs with the earshot, as the hover lets you fire while moving, and also helps with hitting things from above. I described Aster Crown as an arena demon, and I found myself thinking the same about this AC. It's especially powerful against enemies with low stability, which will be staggered by a single missile salvo and earshot grenade, for a quick kill, or nearly. However, having one shield, one melee punish, and one extremely slow and unwieldy grenade launcher means you're left with just your missiles to take care of most of the heavy lifting, and that's not enough. I think if the shield was swapped out for a Gatling cannon, or even just another missile launcher, that alone would rocket this preset up a tier or even 2. The generator and frame needs some work too, but I find myself enjoying my time in this machine, however narrow its operating window may be. UEU. We're finally here, and where do I even start? If you ever find yourself thinking these presets are not being deliberately and shitified, just load this preset. You don't even have to play a mission, just looking at the assembly is enough. 2 Iridium grenade launchers and that's it for weapons. You also get the shield, which couldn't be worse if it tried. The Basho frame offers 11k AP and a meager stability. The booster is the Kikaku again, and the lack of a melee weapon really robs these 2 elements of its best performing stats, melee thrust and melee attack spec. The FCS is pretty weak as well, but the generator is alright at least. No expansion either, not that I'd have expected better. Let's get into the myriad of reasons why this build doesn't work. The fact that your only 2 offensive options are either Iridium or Kick means that you have to stop moving to be doing any damage, and not just for a moment. Remember, grenade launchers have a longer firing animation than bazookas. They aren't even very good. 2 of them won't be enough to stagger most enemies, and you've already exposed yourself to so much fire just to get those 2 shots off. Furthermore, the long reload time coaxes you into taking another shot at inopportune times, so that the stagger bar doesn't start decaying. This makes you more likely to miss or eat a grenade yourself. The punish damage isn't even good, and many tanky bosses will drain your ammo supply dry. This preset is an absolute nightmare to use. Having to stop moving to deal absolutely any damage is agonizing. I was expecting it to get hard, but holy fuck, I was not expecting it to get this tedious. I'll be honest here, I did not beat the game with this preset. The first flare of a big problem was destroy the dam complex. Since I was meant to be role-playing Little ZE, I was gonna betray and eliminate the two red guns. However, I spent days upon days fighting them, and I was getting pretty close. However, the previously mentioned characteristics of the Iridium were baiting me into taking too many shots and leaving myself vulnerable. With my meager durability, I had to slink around like a rat, exploiting their AI and taking easy pot shots when I could, before scampering back to safety. This, in turn, left me without any ammo before I could finish the fight. I realized at some point that I just stopped launching the game. I feel like maybe I could have done this fight legit, but I would lose any interest in this game before this happened if I kept trying. Therefore, I picked the alternate choice and swallowed the first rule break of all this series of challenge runs. Let me put this straight. I've done some hard shit with these presets. I beat Escort the Strider with Aster Crown. That took me 3 days. I beat Snail Teus with Ephemera. That took me 4 days. It was hard, grueling and frustrating, but I felt enough of a drive to just keep trying. Not with UEU. Despite circumventing this hurdle, I was playing very little. I remember recording the early parts of the run, but I cannot find those clips, so I cannot verify the dates. The earliest clip I can find was almost 2 months ago. It took me at least 2 months to complete this playthrough. I was playing only once every few days, and when I did, I only suffered through 2 or 3 missions at a time. It wasn't extremely hard, but it was just boring and tedious as all fuck. The next problem was the Enforcer. My patience was already hanging on by a thread, and I knew this could very well be the end. I managed to pull through, and still continued on until the final major decision. I decided to check if Air or Snail Teus were going to be harder before I made the choice, and it wasn't looking good. Both of them had just too much health. My weapons weren't doing enough punish damage, and the pulse shields were a big problem. That's when I looked up a video. I remembered popping into my recommendations of someone playing Armored Core 6 with UEU. The guy claimed to have over 1000 hours in the game and be a speedrunner too, and he couldn't beat either of them. More than that, he couldn't beat All Mind either, which concluded his challenge run in failure. Let me bring up his words here because they reflect extremely well how I felt.
That's the thing. UAU is so bad, it makes me not want to play the game anymore. I lived through every other preset. I've lived through the Abomination, through S-rank PvP, through speedrunning every category and winning, even trying to make new ones. I have over 1,000 hours in this game. Yes, this is what stops me. Not because it is difficult, but because it is tedious and not fun. That's the true crime of this preset. It turns my favourite game of all time into something I don't enjoy playing, into something not fun, something that all of these things I mentioned previously, regardless of challenge, weren't able to do either.
My mind was already made up. I picked the Liberator path, got to Snail Teus, tried a few times, and then I recreated the build I used to beat the game for the first time, minus the paint job. It's a lot worse than I remembered it being, but I still beat him first try, and then beat the final mission with an actually fun preset, so that I could reset the new game cycle. I don't feel bad about skipping the finale of the game. I knew that if I got too hung up on these bosses, I would just never touch the game again. It would be dramatic to say that Snail Teus or Air had broken me, but I think the real breaking point was the dam complex. Ever since then, I had to force myself to even play this preset. The main difficulty with this AC isn't even the fight with your enemies, it's the battle with yourself, not to close the game and go touch grass. There's a lot of other fun games I could be playing in this time, so I chose to leave behind UEU. When I started making this series, I thought that I was going to add an additional tier, just for Romy. However, with how much suffering was brought upon me by Little Zei's AC, it's hers that I have to put somewhere special. You'd have to pay a fortune for me to load this preset ever again. Infection. Coming from the unholy awfulness that was UEU, I'm getting whiplash at how competent this AC is. It's a biped with a double of the weaker pulse gun, along with a back-mounted plasma cannon and an alright shield. The handheld units spew out a significant amount of damage at close range. None of these weapons deal a huge amount of stagger, but the plasma cannon is certainly the better of the two options. I had my reservations about this weapon, and I'm still not satisfied with it. The AoE on the primary fire really isn't big enough for any crowd control, and even the charged attack is still not very impressive. Therefore, the best way to use it is on singular targets, and hope that they stay within the bubble for the damage to rack up. The ammo capacity is also disappointingly low on all the units, and that's the main weakness of this AC. I actually found a neat synergy here with the shield. The plasma cannon forces you to assume stance when firing, but you can deploy the shield at any time during this process to protect yourself while vulnerable. It's almost a game changer with how often you want to be using the plasma weapon. The shield is actually pretty good, in that I rarely found myself overheating it. However, you'll still be expending a lot of time preparing to fire the cannon. Furthermore, the low projectile velocity mean you'll be whiffing a lot of shots. The charged attack deals some impressive damage and stagger. It can usually fill up most of the bar. However, this overheats the gun, and that makes missing very costly. Once you do manage to stagger the enemy, unloading with the pulse guns is a punisher not to be sneered at. The damage is quite high, and the same goes for the plasma cannon itself. However, there's weapon combos that still outperform the ones on this AC, while being far easier to use and more flexible. Why faff around with charging up plasma shots, deploying the shield at the right time, and keeping the enemy in the bubble when big boom do trick? The frame's pretty average in all aspects. There's a part of me that would like to see this AC as a tetrapod to get rid of the firing stance on the plasma cannon. However, this would make the pulse guns harder to use due to their reduced mobility. This makes me think the weapons combo maybe isn't quite the best set. The booster is the Alula, though the control on this AC doesn't feel like it matches the specs. I don't know why they picked the RLF FCS as two main weapons, are far better at close range than medium. The generator has a very good energy firearm spec. Finally, an all-energy armed AC with such a generator. I don't know why this isn't more common. Unfortunately, this results in the recharge specs on the generator being exceptionally painful to work around, but the damage is worth it. No expansion, which I believe will be the case until the end of the list, since the lower ranked mercs don't have the OS chips to unlock any. All in all, this preset feels well put together and the synergies are quite nice. Staggering enemies with pulse defenses is a breeze, and staggering those without is less of a breeze, but the plasma cannon is doing some work. Despite this, I'm not going to put this AC very high. It's impressively designed for the quality of parts, but better presets just don't have to deal with the downside of a low ammo capacity, weak crowd control, assuming stance, bad range, flexibility, etc, etc. I know we're firmly within the territory of presets deliberately using bad parts to represent their low ranks, parts access, and funds, but I'm rating these as they are in the hands of the player. Bitter Promise. With how low down we are, I was pleasantly surprised with this AC, and it's refreshing that its biggest problem is just that the punish damage isn't quite there, which can be said for so many presets. The weaponry includes the Ransetsu burst rifle and spread bazooka, which are reliable kinetic guns. The other hand unit is this laser pistol. I haven't really tried building around one of those weapons, and now I wish I have, because it's quite good. Decent fire rate, range, and damage output. The heat capacity is also very high, and I almost never had to worry about it overheating. It's got a charged attack, which spews out a bunch of shots in a burst. I tried using it as a punisher, but the spread bazooka is better, unless you're at a significant distance. I also really tried using the burst attack on the Ransetsu, but it just doesn't work. Guys, I really tried. It's weak to punish, and the AI is extremely good at evading it otherwise. Stick to spamming the two main guns, and fire the bazooka when you're up close. You can use these decent shields to help with this purpose. The frame is a modified Melander, but with this Arquebus torso, and the booster is the Flugel, which has good stats on paper, and the machine feels quite average for a biped in mobility. Unfortunately, the FCS is kind of bad. It's the one with optimal missile lock correction time, which this AC has no use for. The other specs are pretty bad, and I do find myself struggling to hit mobile enemies in some circumstances. Furthermore, the generator is just really weak in all aspects, and I wish the capacity was higher. The recharge also tends to scream for a bit more juice, but that's not that common. Like I said, this preset is quite reliable and surprisingly flexible. I even managed to first try the All Mind boss fight using it, which usually takes me many attempts. Spam that double trigger, and spam it a lot, because the high ammo capacities of your main guns let you. The main drawback is the punish damage not being mega, and the internals being kind of crap. Hermit. Another trainer-style Melander biped, but this one's at least a bit more imaginative than that of Iguazu's. The frame and booster stays the same, but the generator is among the worst in the game. The capacity is smaller than my capacity for independent thinking. You'd think the high recharge specs be a positive, but it still takes a really long time to recover the little energy you just spent, and I don't know what attribute causes this. It's probably the worst generator in the game, and it really limits your mobility. If you manage to stay within the constraints, this doesn't feel all that different from Trainer. The FCS is the Abbot, which seems like a decent pick given the weaponry, but I'm not sure if missile lock correction time wouldn't be more useful here. I also think this preset would benefit a lot from assault armor, as its punishers aren't that powerful. So let's talk about the weaponry. The Ducat pistol surprised me with its practicality and impact output. It feels pretty similar to our linear rifle while being a little bit more powerful, but having much worse range. It really can lay on some serious ACS strain despite its small size. The other handheld weapon is the... Holy fuck. It's a bazooka on the lighter side, and it feels quite good to use. It doesn't lack in damage or impact, the firing animation is pleasantly fast, the ammo capacity is abnormally high, and the reload time makes it easy to spam. It's an alright ranged punisher. The other two weapons are less impressive though. The 6-cell missile launcher is similarly practical to the 4-cell variant, and the single-split missile launcher deals decent damage. However, they don't track targets very well. Some enemies will just be dodging all of them. Furthermore, they work best at the mid-range, while the pistol requires you to get in up close. This results in an awkward tug of war, where you must hover around the flipping point, back off when the missiles are ready, and move in when they're reloading. The impact output is strong, but the total damage leaves a lot to be desired. The awkward range interplay, the weak tracking of 2 of your 4 weapons, and the abysmal generator makes this AC fun to use, but underwhelming overall. Burn Pickaxe. We're really scraping the bottom of the barrel here. Another Basho Kikaku based AC, with very bad everything. I mean, just look at those sliders. It's like the worst of all possible worlds combined into one. This machine is bad to use in all possible aspects. The best part is probably the Little Gem. Still fairly weak, still requires stance, but still somehow the most powerful weapon available. The Etsujin is middling as ever, and the 4-cell vertical missile launcher struggles to hit anything. And even when it does, I almost just want to tell it shouldn't have bothered. Both hand weapons will be necessary to properly stagger enemies, and the Punisher is left up to your imagination, because everything is bad. What else can I even say here? There really are no redeeming qualities to this AC. It's quite similar to UEU, and not much better. At least it's not as big of a pain in the ass. My patience for bad ACs was wearing thin, and I sometimes struggled to motivate myself to keep playing. However, once I did, I couldn't set the game down. Every challenge felt surmountable, and it always felt like victory was just within my grasp. If you want to do a challenge run with a really bad AC preset, while still feeling fun, Burn Pickaxe is my best recommendation so far. Mad Stomp. This is it. This is as low as it's going to get. The rock bottomest to ever rock bottom. I just realized what I said. Do you think Romy is a bottom? I think he's a bottom. The man, the myth, the legend, Invincible Romy, is here to show us how to make bad ACs. And you know what? He's a meme. But this preset is somehow far from the worst. I know it seems like I'm being contrarian for the sake of it. I mean, just look at the assembly. The Sweet 16, which is the worst shotgun in the game, having atrocious range and reload time, is our only firearm. The powerful but unwieldy chainsaw, a heavyweight set with terrible mobility, an utterly useless generator, FCS firearm spec, and a booster. And yet, somehow, there's a method to this madness. You see, this AC is surprisingly good at destroying other ACs, and similarly small but durable targets. The chainsaw's alternate attack thrusts it inside of an enemy, stun-locking them for a moment before delivering a powerful finisher. This sequence is almost guaranteed to stagger anything, and then you can punish it with a meat shot from the shotgun, along with a kick. It's not as potent a combo as from the laser slicer, but still far more damaging than what many other presets have to offer. It all comes down to if you can connect that initial charged thrust. Trapping an enemy in a corner is very helpful to this end, as some of them have a very evasive AI. Beyond that, you really don't have anything else to work with. Trying to stagger the enemy with just the Sweet 16 and kicks for a chainsaw punisher is possible, and I had to do so for many of the bigger bosses, such as the Enforcer. However, if that's what your intention is, basically any other preset is going to be better for this purpose. The terrible FCS, firearm spec, fire rate, and range of the weapon make it extremely difficult to reliably build stagger. Now look, Mad Stomp is awful. It's the only preset in this game to have just 2 of 4 possible equipped units. Slapping on absolutely anything on the back, even a shield, will be an objective improvement. The internals alone are bottom tier, and the preset lacks everything: mobility, targeting, flexibility. It's a one-trick pony. However, it does this one trick hilariously well. It's shocking how many roadblocks in this game were absolute nothing burgers with this preset. Chartreuse is an arena opponent that many presets struggle against, at least in my hands. She has unparalleled damage output, and the Pulse Armor expansion lets her shed stagger at critical moments during the fight. Still, I beat her first try with Mad Stomp. I remember struggling like hell against the Ibis series while using the Institute AC, questioning if it's even possible, and now it went down within just a few tries. When making the final choice for the ending, I skipped ahead to see if Air or Snailtaeus would be harder, and I somehow beat the Coral Waifu first try, a boss that took Cannonhead 2 entire days to beat.
Coś tu nie wiem, tak? Teraz, który to prawdziwy kolorwin, tak? Wszyscy byliśmy, znaczy nie byliśmy. Większość ludzi była super zaskoczona i pozytywnie.
I am extremely conflicted as to where to put this AC. On one hand, I don't think I've ever laughed this hard while making this series. This challenge run was even more fun than Burn Pickaxe. However, after all that, I strapped on the final preset to be judged, Loader 4. The speed at which I was mowing down hordes of MTs in the beginning missions reminded me of what I'm missing out on. Spoiler alert, but this is a very below average preset, and it already felt leagues above Mad Stomp. I also have to compare this mech to what it could have been. One easy adjustment: to make with no concessions would be to put Basho arms on this thing, as this would rocket up the melee spec from one of the worst to the very best. It's also missing out on half of all possible equipped weapons. Even if the back had just 2 4-cell missile launchers and the shotgun swapped out for a Zimmermann, this would have easily been at least a C-tier preset, and that's not even getting into considerations of Songbirds, earshots, plasma missiles, Ransetsu's linear rifles, etc. In the end, I cannot put it anywhere but where we all expected it to be. Loader 4. With all the arena components. With all the arena opponents behind us, there is one more preset to go over, and it's pretty poetic. This is the one we're ending with. 394 hours of playtime ago, this is the preset I, just as any other Armored Core 6 player, crash-landed onto Rubicon within. It's the starter mech, and it's about as effective as can be expected, given this information. It's terrible in almost all aspects, and that's the point. The game needs to give us way to escalate the intensity and stakes by letting us progressively evolve our AC throughout the game into a destructive machine of war. The arsenal is dog water, to say the least. While I sung the praises of the assault rifle just a few paragraphs ago, the only reason it felt so effective was due to the fast fire rate. Beyond that, the damage and impact output is barely sufficient to maintain the stagger bar, and even when you combine it with the basic bitch 4-cell missile launcher, ACS overload will be a distant memory for hardier foes, like other ACs or bosses. You have to use the pulse plate proactively to aid in this effort, as it's easily the most powerful weapon on this machine. As a Punisher, it's alright, but I felt unimpressed after coming here straight from the chainsaw. The low melee spec on the arms could also really use a workout. And speaking of the frame, it's below average at best. The sliders barely hit anything close to halfway there. The total AP is around 9k, and the stability is meager as well, for such a weak mobility. The internals all have very weak specs as well, so not much to say here. What I found interesting is that the descriptions of almost all of the parts on this AC make mention of their low energy requirement. I don't know what this says about Walter and or 621, that this was their priority when designing the machine. Anyway, it's bad, and that's the point. More practical than many of the lower tier presets, but seriously lacking in damage output. Also does not reach the mobility of any of the similarly fragile ACs, such as Tsubasa. Right, that's all of them. All 42 presets in Armored Core 6. I was very glad when I finished playing with them. Many of them just aren't very fun to play. Many of them are very impractical. They feel like some random number generator just picked the parts. They don't seem to work very well. I'm surprised I managed to beat the game with presets such as Burn Pickaxe or Mad Stomp. The fact that the only one I skipped over and I didn't beat the game with was UU, I think that is kind of impressive. I suppose I have to somehow pick favorites now, and well, I only have 2 presets in S tier. Entangle is Sula's preset, and that, I don't know why, but I just could not put the game down when I was playing with this preset. I think this might have been the most fun preset to play with. It's... I just really like the weapon selection. It feels like a generic biped to use, but it's not. The weaponry is just so weird and special, and I think that's why I like it so much. And then Steel Haze, just, it's, you know, rusty, like, it just feels so good to use. It feels, when you bought the game and thought to yourself, I'm gonna make a lightweight preset, then Steel Haze is what you wanted it to feel like. basically. It's so fast, it's so nippy, like the quick boosts are just crazy. You're almost teleporting around with those quick boosts. And the weaponry feels very well designed. There's a very good synergy there with 2 kinetic guns doing the stagger, and then you have the laser slicer punish, and then you can even do an assault armor punish. Very effective. I think that's the most effective preset, so the most fun one to play as would be Entangle, and then Steel Haze is probably the best one to actually use. And when it comes to worst, well, I mean, what can I say? It's easily the worst preset to use. Like, regardless of how effective it is, it's just such a nightmare. Having to stop to deal any damage is awful. It's so terrible. It's the only preset that made me just not want to play the game. Even like I said, Burn Pickaxe, Mad Stomp, I could not set the game down, because even though they were awful, they had their sort of quirks and stuff. And when I was coming up against the boss, I always felt like I could just do it if I put my all to it. But UEU is just, you keep trying to fire these grenades and you stand still, you fire one, you fire the other, and you've probably still not staggered the enemy and not dealt much damage, and before you know it, you've just taken a huge amount of damage sitting out in the open while firing those grenades. And I mean, I've already expressed my frustration about this. It's awful, it's terrible. I feel like maybe I could do it. Like, I beat the game with every single other preset, so surely UEU should also be possible, but I just don't want to do it. It's so frustrating, it's so boring that I'll never do it. I just don't want to. I feel like a much better player having tried all these 8 presets, and I recommend trying out at least a few of them, even the shitty ones. Like, some of them are quite fun to use. Hermit, for example, I don't know why, but I was just really looking forward to that one, and when I played it, it was good. I don't know why, I just had fun. Like, the pistol is surprisingly effective, and I knew it was effective, but I kind of forgot how good it really was, and it just kind of synergizes pretty well with the rest of the weapons. Even though the AC is pretty bad, but I had fun, and I was looking forward to trying it. And similar to Nosak, like the laser pistol, also fun weapon to use. Maeterlinck, 2 pulse guns, baller, right? It's cool, I recommend trying some of them. 42 presets. Yeah, that's a lot of them. Thanks for watching, and I don't know what I'm going to be putting my time towards now, because that was a lot of time put into this series of challenge runs. Thanks for watching, bye bye.